Good morning. It's Tuesday, October 6th, 2015. And yeah, it's Tech Talk Today, episode 214. And we just got off a big Microsoft event. I'm back in the studio. It's good to be back. I'm glad the show has returned. And thank you for letting me take a little time off from Tech Talk while I was on the road. You know, I thought about it. Conceptually, I thought recording the show would be very easy and straightforward because it's audio. But then in practice, I remembered I also have a video feed that goes with it, and I didn't really have a solid way to just whip that out while I was on the road. That's what she said. Anyways, we're back with episode 214. Let's bring in the Mumble Room. Time-appropriate greetings, Mumble Room.
Hey
guys. So let's start with the Microsoft announcements today because they just had Microsoft Day basically, and they just got done live streaming a pretty impressive presentation. I'm going to underscore that later on in the show because for Microsoft it actually was a pretty impressive presentation. Let's start with some of the smaller news to begin with. A new Microsoft Band is coming out beginning at $249. Looks much thinner, much better, more along what the lines it probably should have been as a product with Cortana integrated now in addition to GPS tracking, sleep tracking, heart rate monitor, and other features found in the first band. So all that's in there. October 30th is the release day. I wonder how Cortana integration will go. Microsoft says it's the band that lets you get away from your phone instead of like a wearable that requires the phone. Kind of a dig maybe at the Apple Watch there. The next news item, Microsoft Surface Pro 4. Now, they say one of the things they've upgraded is the type cover, but also the new machine is supposed to be, I'm going to get into some of the details, but the new machine is supposed to be a monster with 5-point multi-touch support. It has a fingerprint sensor now. It's going to cost $899, and it also is using Gorilla Glass 4. And they do have, of course, because this is how everybody rolls now, they have a little bit of a video about it, which is fun. Let's take a look. There's the fingerprint sensor by the mouse. .4 millimeters, 12.3-inch pixel sense display with 5 million pixels, palm detection, parallax, magnetic pen storage, laptop class keyboard, faster and quieter typing with the thinnest type cover ever, they say. Glass precision trackpad, 40% larger, with 5-point multi-touch support. Hybrid cooling system. 6th Gen i processor. 16 gigs of RAM, 1 terabyte of storage. Front-facing immersive audio. And, of course, a mirrored reflective Windows logo. It's interesting, too, how into the magnetics they are now. Yeah, 1 terabyte SSD is, of course, the high-end option. Now, moving on, that'll be available on October 26th. Now, here is, honestly, the story that it just feels like the other stories just are dwarfed in comparison. Today, Microsoft has introduced the Surface Book, a convertible laptop. Now, they call it the Surface Book, and that was the first thing everyone reacted to. In fact, it took about 10 minutes in the chat room for people to sort of recoup after the announcement from the name. And what grabbed our attention after that was the specs. If you think about it, Surface Book is actually kind of a clever name in the sense that it almost conjures up immediately what you would think. A Surface-based laptop. It's much like the Surface Pro with a few extra surprises. This one has a 13.5-inch touchscreen with 6 million pixel sense pixels, they say, an NVIDIA GeForce discrete GPU with GDDR5 RAM. It also has a PCI Express connected solid-state storage, so it's a very fast drive. And they did some really impressive demos in their presentation. I wanted to kind of talk about the presentation a little bit because it was actually rather interesting. The presentation sort of had its own unique style than pretty much any other tech presentation for an event like this. The presenter's name is a little challenging, but in fact, I don't even remember. Mumble Room, what was the presenter's name? I already forgot what it was.
Panos Panay?
Yeah, that's what it was, Panos, yeah. Didn't you think he did a pretty good job in his own way?
He sounded better than Sache.
Yeah, he did. He seemed really passionate about the product, and That seemed like that combined with what seemed to be a relatively compelling offering. I mean, it's got an i7 processor in this thing, and the discrete GPU does make it stand out from other devices in the 13-inch form factor. And then the thing that really seemed to be rather fascinating about it is that it separates off from the keyboard, and it's still a tablet. Now, you don't get discrete graphics in that mode, and you don't get USB ports in that mode, and you likely get reduced battery life, and of course you lose the keyboard. But it becomes a full-fledged x86 tablet. The question is there a big demand for a Microsoft-built laptop like this? Optically designed, they say. Every line will be intentional. It's about $1,500, reasonably spec'd. I don't know, Mumble Room, would any of you be compelled to buy something like this?
Me, not so much, because I'd rather get a System 76, but, maybe a power user for Office might need it.
No, I don't think so. That seems like the Surface Pro if you just want to run Office. This thing's got some serious. I mean, they demoed CAD, they demoed Premiere Pro, video editing. They demoed like really high-end stuff. So to me, it seems like this is not meant for casual people at all. The line I think a lot of people in our audience are going to draw is, could you run other operating systems on it? And I'm wondering the way this connector works, if that's going to be possible or not. The way this connector works, it could be just PCI pass-through, as we were speculating, or it could be some sort of hybrid approach to make the live rip-off possible, where you can just disconnect it, and it transfers to tablet mode, which means in an instant it's going to have to transfer discrete graphics, disconnect from all of its USB devices, and in any kind of type of USB device you might have plugged in at the base, and also switch to a different bank of batteries, potentially. That might require some sort of software middle layer that means it might never work with Linux. Then again, this is a great opportunity for Microsoft to show the new Microsoft and show that they could build a hardware product that can work with other operating systems, a hardware product that doesn't require Windows. Because one of the things they said in their wrap-up is that people don't require Windows, they want Windows. They want to make sure people want Windows. Well, build your hardware that way then. Any other thoughts, you guys?
Interesting that Microsoft, just by waiting until hardware got powerful enough, has actually managed to converge on one operating system for all these devices.
Ah, the magic word. I wondered if that would come up. Convergence. So is this Microsoft arriving at convergence first? I mean, it very practically, I guess, isn't it? Because you disconnect and it converts to a tablet, and you reconnect, and it converts to a full laptop.
Yeah, the same week that Google announces the Pixel C, and strangely, it doesn't run Chrome OS, it runs Android.
Android, yeah.
I'm still wondering about the GPU in the base. I want to know if it's like a full-on, like, entry-level GPU that most gamers get, or is it something that you see in a laptop that's just a basic GPU? That will really determine to me what kind of product this is, and I guess I'll have to wait for the tech specs on it.
Yeah, so what we do know is the only thing they said is that when you're using the integrated graphics, that's likely a Skylake integrated GPU, and when you're using the discrete graphics, it's an NVIDIA GeForce GPU, and it's going to be something that has GDDR5, so that's going to be any class of GeForce GPU that has DDR5. So that probably narrows it down there. I'm betting based on the two demos they showed that clearly do show pretty good discrete GPU performance is they did real-time transitions between HD clips in Premiere, which the thing that was unique about that demonstration was that the crossfade happened with full frame rates. Usually when you're playing in Premiere, you'll lose a few frames at best on a good system right there. And they had 0 frame loss when they were switching between the transition clips. That means that an entire transition happened on the GPU completely. And then also the other thing that they demonstrated was real-time editing of an AutoCAD file, which, wasn't incredibly impressive, but did show it immediately rendering the modifications to the AutoCAD file. Which would probably, and then, they showed some gameplay, but the gameplay was video recorded. It wasn't real gameplay. They pre-recorded it. But to me, it indicates probably a pretty powerful GPU in there. And it's definitely better than... See, here's the key thing, though, is it really just has to be better than the integrated GPU, because that's what pretty much all the other 13-inch laptops, well, looking mostly at the MacBook, which is where they're losing their ass to. See, the problem Microsoft has here is that when developers are buying the MacBook, they're buying the MacBook because if you're looking at the market at like Dell, Lenovo, maybe HP, and Apple, and you're a hipster developer, not to be disparative there, but we're just boiling it down to basics here. Microsoft is losing their ass to the MacBook in that when you stack up that category of things. Well, some of the fastest growing platforms are exactly those kinds of developers: Android developers, Mac developers, iOS developers, and web developers. A lot of those guys and gals are buying MacBooks to do their development on. They don't need Windows. And some of them are still running Linux. Some of them are using Linux, absolutely, especially a lot of the web development category. But if you're developing for iOS or the Mac platform, you know what you're buying. And if you can develop for iOS and continue to develop for the web, in some cases, it's more economical and sensible to get the MacBook. Because if you have to have the MacBook to do the iOS development and you can still develop for other platforms on the MacBook, like Android and the web, Microsoft is losing their ass to that. And it's obvious. So this is clearly a respondent to the MacBook. So when they're competing now to the MacBook in price, I don't know. So this thing starts at $1,400, and that's the base config. We don't have a way to configure one yet, I don't believe. But if we go over to the Mac store, so if we go to apple.com and we go look at the MacBook, the 13-inch MacBook, what price does it start at? Let's see. I'm going to say buy. And the Apple MacBook starts at, of course, you have the MacBook One, so you have a couple different options here, but the MacBook starts at $1,299. So $200 less. Oh, you can't quite see it's cut off. But it's $200 less. And this is what they're currently competing against. I'm going to say, design for design, this is a better looking device. But from a hardware spec, they're kicking its ass. And for a couple $100 more, it's a pretty obvious improvement. Discrete GPU. This also has PCIe storage. Apple has really been kicking ass on their PCIe-based storage for a while now, so Microsoft kind of had to do that. So this is what they're competing against, though, in my estimation, is the MacBook and the MacBook Pro 13-inch and things like that. And they have MacBook Air. And so if they have a GPU, if they have a discrete GPU from NVIDIA, right there out of the gate, you're better off. And they just also announced the Visual Studio tools are getting improvements in GPU compiling. So I think they probably have a competitive product for a certain category of people. And they also have a product that's going to, be great for like the Paul Thurrots and Mary Jo Foleys out there who are big Windows fans. But I think for me, I would actually be, it's got a backlit keyboard. I like that. It's got all these things. What I would really like the only way I would vote with my wallet for this is if they had built it in such a way that allows me to run other operating systems on there. If it's locked down to Windows, I can't vote for that. And that's sort of where I would draw the line. We're going to play the introduction clip to this thing because it's actually pretty interesting at the end of the show today as a wrap-up video. But guys, any other thoughts on the Surface Book before we move on?
It might be interesting as a Linux machine, even if you just stay on the Intel integrated graphics all the time.
Yeah, that would be a shame, because there's definitely probably $150, $200 of price in this thing around that well, I don't know if it's that high, but there's definitely a premium for that discrete GPU. Yeah, I use GNOME 3 on my XPS 13, and it is kind of nice every now and then just to touch the screen a little bit, especially when I'm showing the computer to somebody else and they have it and I can just reach over and touch it. That is really nice. Oh, one other thought I had about this is the resolution on this thing. I don't know if the chat room has the actual details, but the way that the marketing speak here is it has a 6 million pixel screen with Pixel Sense touchscreen technology, a 6 million pixel screen. What does that exactly mean resolution-wise? I take it means it's very high resolution. In fact, they say it's the highest in class. So it's obviously a high DPI display. I just don't know how high of a DPI it is, but
3000 by 2000 resolution.
Oh, okay. So what in Windows is really set up for high DPI? I mean, is Windows really that great on a high DPI display? My last experience with it was basically it just looked like a lot of the UI elements get scaled up. It doesn't actually look like pixel doubling is happening, or it just looks like the GDI interface gets double drawn, and that's what you get. I mean, it looks like the Metro apps look fine, but they just scale like they do with everything else. But the Windows, like the copy dialog and things like that, the file menu, like it all looks like it's just been scaled up. And maybe my experience is maybe it's changed more with Windows 10 because I did try it actually under Windows 10. That was where I was trying it under. So I'm not totally convinced on what's super compelling about having a really high resolution display on a Windows computer unless you're looking at photos or they mentioned Flipboard. But I don't know. So wow, Imacon comes in with a little pricing. Apparently he was able to spec it for us. So if you get the i7 Surface Book with 16 gigabytes of RAM, 512 gigabytes of storage, it's $2,700. Yikes, $2,700. And they're going to probably, and then the other thing was with this one is this is the first generation, and you know they're probably going to stick to this thing for a little while. So it's worth probably another rev, especially since this is their first laptop ever. It's not like it's like the first generation of a new product line. Well, it is, but I mean, it's not like they have had other product lines to begin with. I mean, yes, they have Surface Pro experience, I guess. So yeah, I suppose. I mean, yeah, I'm not for $2,700. I could buy a lot of computer. I could buy a lot more. The main thing there I would want for that is a lot more storage. A lot more storage. $2,700, is that even higher than Apple pricing? I mean, that's like what kind of machine would you get? I mean, let's just go. Okay, I'm gonna go look. Now we're gonna go MacBook Pro. Let's go MacBook Pro.
It's gonna be about the price of a 15-inch MacBook Pro.
Yeah,
that's
what I was thinking, right? So I'm looking MacBook Pro category now. So the 13-inch tops out at $1,799, and that gets you 2.9 gigahertz processor, 512 gigabytes of PCI Express storage. Now you're using the Intel graphics, but it's the Iris 6100, and you get their touchpad. So when you get up to so for $2,500, $2,499, you get the 15-inch MacBook Pro with a 2.5 gigahertz i7 with turbo boost up to 3.7 gigahertz. 16 gigabytes of RAM, 512 gigabyte PCIe storage, AMD Radeon R9 M370X GPU with 2 gigabytes of RAM for $2,500. I mean, that would probably be the better buy, unless you really wanted the 13-inch form factor. Yeah, I'm not quite sure how that's going to work out for them. I don't know. I mean, Apple's GPU, I don't know how, we don't really quite know what the Surface GPU is, but I'm never super impressed with the GPUs Apple chooses either. All right, well, let's just wrap up with one more sort of thing coming down the road. Maybe the product that some of you care more about is HoloLens. We got a little bit of details on HoloLens. The first public version won't be for consumers. It's going to be for developers coming in Q1 2016, so that probably means the end of Q1. Who knows? For $3,000, guys. $3,000. Yeah, yikes. That's my broken bell for that one. It's going to be comparable to the units demonstrated earlier this year, though Microsoft says no information is like specifics. But earlier this year, we learned the hardware has an x86 processor in it with 2 gigabytes of RAM, 802.11ac, and it uses a 60 hertz refresh rate. So that's probably what the developer edition will be like. For $3,000, makes that Google Glass for $1,500 seem like a deal. I never thought I'd see the day where Google Glass looked like a better deal for $1,500, but there you go. Wow, for a product that is, I mean, $3,000. Is that maybe just to keep the the problem with this product too is like we're looking at an image right now, but that's not what the experience looks like at all. One of the big things you have to remember about this is it's got a very narrow field of view. This is what drives me crazy about the Microsoft product shots, is they make it look like this completely immersive environment, and you'd have to be watching the video version to see what I'm talking about right now. But in reality, it's a narrow field of view. It's like looking through a slot for those old slides as a kid. It is. It's like the width of a long pack of cards. It's about the height of a pack of cards and longer. It's not. You don't get the whole field of view like they show in these product demos. Now, I would think for $3,000 they'd at least be giving you a little bit better of idea what you're actually going to get. Yeah, a bit misleading, especially like North Ranger points out when they're doing the Minecraft stuff. So let's talk about one of my favorite products out there. The Roku is getting an update. Roku 4, which will support 4K video. And I don't know exactly what this means, but it's going to allow you to follow your favorite shows. I do that with something called Sick Rage and Usenet. But anyways, Roku has announced the new device, the Roku 4, and it's going to have 4K video with 60 frames per second, better Wi-Fi with 802.11 AC built into the box, HDMI and Ethernet, and USB will also still be available. Thank you, Roku, for keeping the Ethernet. We appreciate that, especially those of us who spent money to get Ethernet run in our living room. Here's a new one, though. Optical audio. So you can just hook up, the sound bars are becoming really, really common now, and a lot of them connect over optical, so you'll be able to patch that right in, or, of course, a standard receiver. Now, I don't know if you guys heard, because Tech Talk was on break, but Amazon actually is pulling the Roku, so we're not quite sure what's going to happen there. Maybe Amazon will create an app and then put it back, but this is also going to ship with Roku OS 7. I don't know exactly what the big thing is there, but it introduces the follow feature and the My Feed function, which all sound like features I don't want. I just really wanted to play. Really wanted to play Roku. Plex and Netflix. What throw me off here is it looks like it's going to come with 1,000 channels now. Wow, that's incredible. But Roku insists that healthy audiences for niche channels are in there, and it says that they're more growing all the time. It points to examples of an autism channel for parents and caregivers of people with autism, JW Broadcasting for Jehovah's Witnesses. It says you can find a lot of interesting stuff on Roku. And I agree. In fact, we have a Jupiter Broadcasting channel on Roku, which you can find out about. I think if you just Google for it, it'll probably come up. And the new unit looks kind of like it's been flattened down a little bit from the old one, like a pancake been squished down, but it looks pretty good. And it's not bad. Oh. And this is probably my favorite feature, which I almost completely forgot to mention. They're still including the headphones with the remote, so those of you who are not familiar, I love this feature on Roku where you can be watching TV and, like, say your significant other or your kids are going to bed and you want to be able to still watch TV but not have to, the sound wake them up. You plug headphones into the remote and it uses Bluetooth audio to switch the audio from the TV to the headphones, and right there with the remote, it's super convenient. But the other thing that the Roku 4 is introducing is a Find Me button, which you push on the Roku itself and it pings the remote. My kids lose the remote all the time, so that is a great feature. And I'm going to give, since we're going a little long here, I'm going to give a shout out. Android 6.0 launched yesterday. Marshmallow. And it doesn't fix some of the problems I wanted fixed. Mainly a unified way for all Android devices to get updated. But if you got a Nexus device, you can get the update right now. And there is a very comprehensive review over at Ars Technica. It is 12 pages long. And the one I'm going to be reading about, I was just ranting and raving about this on the pre-show, is Direct Share. Now in the share menu, you can, I don't know exactly what it does, but my understanding is Direct Share is going to be a great way to do, obviously big, large file transfers off Android devices. And while I was on my road trip, I was recording some of the videos on my S6, and then then I would get back to do editing, and I would have no internet connectivity, especially what happened when I was at the Grand Tetons National Park and I was camping, is there was no signal, nothing. I mean, it is a dead zone. There's nothing. And so I all of a sudden realized how difficult it is to actually get really large files off an Android device when you can't, like, upload it to Dropbox or OneDrive or Google Drive or OwnCloud. Like, you just really get limited and you have to break out a USB cable and monkey at it like an animal. And thankfully, Linux makes actually that process quite easy, but other operating systems do not. And it was really kind of, I was just thinking, why isn't there more of a direct send system that just goes from machine to machine? So hopefully, I'm going to read the review and find out if that's what it is. I'll have it linked in the show notes. It's 12 pages long, so I don't think we'll be going through it right here in the show. Now that I'm back, I'd really like to draw attention to how much we need your support right now at patreon.com/today. I think a multitude of factors experimenting with our last format, which is kind of unfortunate, but I'll get to that in a second. And probably, the latest thing is the Patreon hack hasn't helped. And thankfully, the Patreon hack seems like it's not as impactful for the end users. It's more impactful for content creators. But the end result is we're down to 551, and we were up to 560 just a little bit ago. And I would love to see us try to get back up to 560 patrons, as we are very ambitious here and do not want to slow down and do not want to reduce staff. I want to grow, and I want to also continue to make the content better. That's why I get up every single morning. And I need your help and your support over at patreon.com/today. Also, speaking of the last format change, we're going to have a format update in this week's episode of the Linux Action Show on Friday. So tune in for that if you're curious about that. I wanted to just address it really quickly, though. I think I think it's probably in the long-term health for our shows a very good thing that from time to time we don't get too scared to experiment. Even with the big show, I think it's important to realize it is a podcast and it needs to be a little weird and indie sometimes. We need to be able to tweak things and experiment with things because we don't want to just get old and stale because it's comfortable. And sometimes I think that process, because it's not a big production with a huge staff behind it that take a season break and then reformulate the show and then come back with a new style, a new package. Instead, it's every single week we iterate, and it's done out in the open, much like the operating system we all follow. I think sometimes in the thick of things, in the debate, in the process, people get disenfranchised and leave, instead of sticking around and continuing to support for the long-term evolution. Now, there's parallels you can draw to big controversies in the open source community when some new thing is being rolled out, systemd, and then people bail and get very upset and people burn off. But over time, things work their way out. Organically, things become very natural. This is very much the way podcast works. If you are changing something that is produced every single week, that process has to be done. That experimentation has to be done out in the open, or else there would be no show while we reformulated. I don't want the audience to get discouraged when that happens, though, because we still are monitoring your feedback. And more than ever, when we're doing something like this, we've brought in new editing staff. We've bulked up on research. We're doing all of these things now that are leaps of faith, and we need your support to be able to keep doing them. Patreon.com/today. I would very much appreciate your support. If you have someone maybe that's been listening and they've never contributed, maybe suggest to them they do contribute. Now would be a good time for people to do so. Now we're going to end with the Microsoft Surface Book. And by the way, it's Surface Space Book, not MacBook, which is one word. So there you go. I didn't rip that part off. So the Microsoft Surface Book, when they first ran this video, they paused it right before they snapped the machine apart. And then they waited till after the presentation to reveal that little bit. It was actually a pretty good sleight of hand. I got to give it to Microsoft on the Surface Book introduction. I think for as long as I've been watching the company, it's probably their best product introduction ever. The ending was a little long and drawn out, but the actual product introductions and the style and the reverence that guy had in the way he did it was unique, and I really enjoyed it. And the video production's pretty top-notch, so we'll end right there. That'll probably, wow, that's probably my quota of positive Microsoft things I'm going to say for the year. Whew, got that out of the way. All right, techtalktoday.reddit.com. Help contribute to the stories and the content and the community you'd like to see in the show, techtalktoday.reddit.com. And don't forget jupiterbroadcasting.com/calendar for live times. We'll be live tomorrow. I believe Angela, if all goes as planned, will be joining us in studio. We'll probably get a little bit later start, but she'll be joining us. And then Thursday and Friday, I plan to have shows. However, I may update the calendar depending on where I end up parking the trailer and getting all that settled. But I'll keep you guys updated either way on the calendar at jupiterbroadcasting.com/calendar. And I appreciate everybody who made it live in the Mumble Room. Thanks for coming back, guys. It was good to chat with you. And I invite you out there listening to join us live tomorrow in the Mumble Room. We'll even have probably a little bit later start since I'll be waiting for Ange. And you should be able to make it in there. Just go to jblive.tv and in the chat room, bang Mumble, and it will give you the address of destination. It's very secret. No one knows it. I don't know why we do it that way. Maybe it's to make everybody feel really cool. No. All right. Thanks for joining me, and enjoy this Microsoft product demo. It's actually not half bad.